you have to be really intentional. You have to know what you're working towards.
That's for the new investors. They're trying to wrap their mindset around how to define what success looks like as an investor, right? For the more seasoned investors out there, if you scale in beyond just a few little properties, it really becomes a business, and then you really fall back on the systems that you put in place. What do you have behind the scenes so that they can run their business a little more seamlessly?
One of the major traps that people get into is maybe they have something that they started when they first bought the property, and they're like, oh, cool, it's going to be $500. And then totally forgot about it for the last 6 months. And like, yeah, I got to go pull that back up again. Well, one of the systems that I do is real estate investing is a forced personal development program. As you go through, those different levels, you have to become a better version of yourself to then give that back to your tenants, your team, your community, and you kind of constantly grow through that ladder.
Joining us today is Steve Arneson. Steve, can you tell us about your background in real estate and how you got started in the industry?
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. I love your show. I know many of the guests in the past, and if for whatever reason this is the first show that you as the listener or watcher are watching, go back to the start and listen to all of them, because all of the guests and the episodes and the conversation have been really fantastic. But the cliff notes on me, I started this when I was 24, but even before that, I kind of started this in the womb, if you will. My great-grandfather bought an apartment building. My grandfather built a couple different real estate businesses. When I was growing up, we would do like live-in flips where we'd buy like a bit of a beater. We'd live in it for a few years, do a whole gut reno, enjoy it for a couple of years, and then move on to the next one. And then, when I was 24, I bought my first live-in flip, and it was like bottom of the market here in Victoria, BC. It was the best neighborhood. It was a great building, and it was just like a great deal. And so I knew that this was going to be a great investment and a great project to work on. A few years later, exited and like doubled my money plus. And then through that process, I was really unhappy with my career. I don't know if you've ever felt the same at times where maybe you have like a reverse role model, or maybe you just find out that, man, I am built for so much more. And I had a couple of those realizations, and a buddy of mine literally dragged me to one of those like real estate guru conferences, and I fought him the entire time. It's so funny. But on the second day, I was like, this is it. I think there's opportunity here in my market, with my network, with my expertise. Let's go. And so in 2015, started to build a portfolio of like BRRRR strategy income properties here in Victoria. And then over the years, that sort of elevated from like duplexes or single families to like the triplex model, to the 5 or 6plex model, to the larger multifamily model, and then eventually got into the developments as well. So that's sort of where I'm at today, is a lot of focus on developments, land acquisition, and then managing the portfolio that we've built over the years.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there, Steve. Firstly, I'm still stuck on you getting started at 24, because you don't look like you much past 24. Like maybe what are you at now? Trying to calculate. Okay, 2015.
I'm 36 now, and for my entire life, people have thought I was younger, and I have a bit of a baby face. And I just pray that continues through my 50s and 60s when they think I'm 30
Absolutely.
or 40.
Okay, so you've been exposed to this through your entire childhood growing up. And what was that initial switch from live-in flips to, hey, I want to start acquiring and adding real estate to my portfolio? Because there's doing flips and then there's acquiring the rental properties, and it's two different ball games. What sort of pushed you in that direction?
Yeah, I think, the residual income was a big piece of it, right? And as I started to develop sort of a stronger financial mindset, I started to realize that a flip is one input in, one input out, and you have to work for your dollars every single time. Whereas an income property, you can work for your dollars once and continue to kind of get paid time and time again, month in, year in, etc. Now, you have to like manage property, you have to deal with tenants, you have to still maintain the building and stuff. But I just found that it was a little bit more attractive to me at the time to have that, drip continually grow. And when you I love looking at data. I'm a bit of a data freak. And when you look back across history in Victoria and in Vancouver Island, the only thing real estate does across a long enough time horizon is go up. And so I figured if I can hold on to these things and they either break even or pay me money on a monthly basis, why not hold on to it?
No, I love that. I love that. And to be honest, I love the journey because you started out on the small side, and then I think duplexes, and then small multifamily, and you've worked your way up and grown that way. Do you self-manage all of your units? Has that always been the case? And what drove you towards scaling up on that side versus just sticking to single family units?
Yeah, great question. So when we initially started, my business partner is the property manager.
Okay.
And I found that I like rules maybe a little bit too much. And in British Columbia, the rules are really lopsided into the tenant's favor. And so
Yeah.
even when the tenant was wrong, and I'd be like, here's the rules, they kind of had freedom to do whatever they wanted anyways. And sometimes our personalities would clash. And so it was best that Randy, my ex-business partner, kind of managed the tenants. And that, for the most part, continues. And a big thing in my vision as I was planning out what my life was going to look like from 10 years ago is I really wanted to build a lifestyle and a business that allowed me to be location independent. So many of us as real estate investors want to have the passive income to go and enjoy the world. I've been fortunate enough to travel to 29 different countries, and I want to, no, sorry, 30 now. I knocked off 30 earlier this year, and I want to continue to grow, that list and experience culture and talk to amazing, beautiful people and see cool history. And that's something that really has fueled me throughout my life. And I know that if I had to, manage a large scale portfolio by being on site every single day, that just wasn't going to be realistic. So wanted to be really intentional with how we scaled and grew. So that continues. He manages the portfolio for the most part. There's a couple of doors that I look after personally. And sorry, I forgot what your second question was. Was it about scaling or?
Honestly, I have another question based off of what you just said.
Sure.
But yes, it was the choosing to scale up and having that economies of scale versus staying with single family units and just acquiring that way.
It was actually a lot about evolution. So being on the statistical side of things and being so
Yeah.
I keep a very strong pulse in the market. And as we were building our portfolio, the market evolved. And so more competition started to enter in the market. The prices of homes were escalating, but the rents were not. And so our price point in to acquire the property and then do like the BRRRR model renovation got higher and higher and higher, but our rent output or our value back wasn't getting any higher. And so if we were to continue going down that model, these properties wouldn't cash flow, right? So
Yeah.
it was either build properties with equity in it and just keep the equity in there, and then we eat cash flow on a daily basis, which doesn't really build to my intentional model, or we have to evolve our thought process, our business model, etc. And so that's why we grew into the small multis and then the larger multis and then the development, plus some passion and a lot of interest into that space. But a lot of it was sort of staying on the cutting edge of the market.
Oh, no, that makes a lot of sense. And there's something that I want to unpack there. But before we move on, I want to know what were some things that you intentionally implemented so that you could sort of work towards the lifestyle that you're aiming for, which is being location free and being able to travel. What were some things that you intentionally did? Now, obviously, number one was knowing that, hey, I don't potentially want to manage all of these units myself and be stuck in the same location all the time. So let's outsource the property management or have it in-house, but have someone else take care of that. What were some other things that you put in place?
So there's two things I'll say, and we can kind of unpack it as we go. But the first two things I just want to share is everything has a cost. So if you want to build a portfolio, I'll just say of dozens of doors, the cost and that might be exactly what your goal is, Mr. or Mrs. Listener. You might want 30 doors because you go, cool, 30 doors, $100 a door in cash flow. That pays a lot of my expenses. I'm good to go, right? And then so many beginners I find, and I was caught in this too when I first began, I didn't think about the cost of that. And not necessarily the financial cost, but the lifestyle cost. So, like what I was saying is maybe you have these 30 doors and you're like, cool, now I've got all my expenses paid for, I'm free. But if you're having to do what I was trying to avoid in the first place, which is I don't want to be handcuffed to the sites themselves. That would be the cost. So everything has a cost, and you have to be able to you have to like, lift yourself above to look down on like all of the different pieces playing. I often kind of talk about real estate investing as you kind of get bigger and bigger and bigger. You graduate from playing checkers to playing chess, right? Checkers is one move at a time, and you're like, okay, well, I'll buy this property. Okay, I've sold this property, buy this property, sold this property. Whereas chess is you have to be thinking 10, 15 moves ahead, and you have different types of movements available to you, but you're also playing defense on and offense simultaneously. And sometimes it's better to sacrifice your knight to get the queen, if you will. And so we've sold properties at times because it is the right thing to do to then like add entrepreneurial runway, or because our return on equity had kind of like, maxed out. And so the second piece I just wanted to share, everything has a cost, is the front side of that facing coin, which is you have to be really intentional. You have to know what you're working towards. And I think getting that type of clarity on the front side, even if you don't know how to necessarily get there. One of the most profound quotes in my life is by Marie Forleo. And Oprah called her like the thought leader of this generation. And her quote is, clarity comes from engagement, not thought. And so you can think about all the things that you want out there, and you might have like big goals, big dreams, or even, just modest, humble dreams and goals. But too many people get caught in just thinking about it, what the next step is, what the right step is.
Yep.
And a lot of that clarity comes from taking the first step. And then you go, oh, now I know maybe that was the right move, maybe not. But now I know that was the right move or not. And you can plan the next one and the next one. And these little steps start to clear your path of vision. And those two things alone, I think, from day one have been really, really helpful to allow me to build, scale, maintain lifestyle, like work-life balance kind of thing. And continue to live like a happy life regardless of what happens.
I love that you mentioned that though, because oftentimes if I speak to a new investor and I ask them like, what's the goal? Sometimes it's like just a random number. I want to have 3,000 units,
It's always random.
But
yeah.
Why?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Why? And then one of my clients, like he was one of those random number of doors people. He wanted 200 doors. And I was like, why? And he goes, well, because they have 200 doors. I was like, well, are your goals the same as theirs?
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, then where did the 200 doors come from? And I was like, well, do you want 200 doors in Victoria? Do you want 200 doors in Moncton? Do you want 200 doors in Portugal? And when you start to think about it and you go 200 doors in Victoria, maybe you're losing $500 a month in cash flow, but you have a ton of equity.
Yes.
200 doors in Moncton, maybe you make a ton of cash flow, but you don't have any equity. Two very different lifestyles, two very different types of objectives, and you have to know the intentionality behind the decision making.
I couldn't agree more, man. I couldn't agree more. Now, okay, so that's for the new investors. They're trying to sort of wrap their mindset around how to define what success looks like as an investor, right? Because it's more than just the number. And I like the fact that you were intentional about where you're growing towards. For the more seasoned investors out there who are a little further along in their journey, do you have any, because I'm a systems guy myself, I love systems. Do you have any systems that you've put in place that allow you to be a little more agile in terms of location, right? So that you're able to run, because this is a business at the end of the day. If you scaling beyond just a few little properties, it really becomes a business, and then you really fall back on the systems that you put in place. I'm curious to see what do you have behind the scenes, anything that you're willing to share with the more seasoned investors so that they can run their business a little more seamlessly.
So I think one of the other traps that a lot of people get caught up in, from pre-acquisition to beginner investor through like intermediate to expert or whatever you want to call it. One of the major traps that people get into is they don't understand that a business is required. You need to have the business behind the business.
Yeah.
So like systems, you need to have. So I'll spit off a couple things that I typically do. What I believe is, like, first and foremost, you have to have like some sort of monthly P&L, some sort of idea of what your financial forecasted world looks like. And I probably guarantee you that 80% of people listening right now do not have that. Not clearly, anyways. Maybe they have something that they
Yeah.
started when they first bought the property, and they're like, "Oh, cool, it's gonna be $500," and then totally forgot about it for the last 6 months, and like, yeah, I got to go pull that back up again. Well, one of the systems that I do is every single month I get my EA to take all of our credit card and bank account statements and put it into an Excel sheet, and then that gets automated into a like monthly forecaster. So at the very beginning of each month, I pull that up. I verify all the correct expenses and income, see if there's anything missed or that was incorrect. Fix that, obviously. But what that allows me to do on any given day of the month is look at it and see what opportunities or challenges lie ahead financially. And if you don't have the finances figured out, your business is not going to be successful, period.
I love that. I love that. Because, yes, most people look at this on a yearly basis, but if you're looking at this every single month, it allows you to pivot and make more strategic moves a whole lot sooner. And course correct if you headed in the wrong direction there. Oh man. Okay, I love that. That's a fantastic. I don't know. Did I stop you? Did you have any more that you were gonna rattle off there?
Well, I just want to, I'll add one more thing into that too. And so the forecaster itself, if you want it, just like send me a message and I'm happy to send the templated version that I have. What it does is it goes from 2024, 2025, 2026, 2027. And so when you're getting engaged into a real estate project, it is like a marriage, right? So it is longer
Yeah.
term, unless you're doing like a short-term flip or something like that. But like if you're having an income property, if you hold a multifamily or development project, you're looking years out into the future. And so with the forecaster, I call it telescoping, you basically get to see when these major capital expenditures are coming out. And then you have to plan for it. So if you have a new roof that's going to cost you 50 grand coming out in January, let's say, and it's April now, and you're looking at your bank account because it's there in the spreadsheet, and you go, oh, I've only got 40 in there, and my income may not be where it needs to be to make sure that roof gets done. I need to go make some capital.
Yeah.
Or on the other side of things, if you're like really comfortable capital wise, you can go, cool, how can I invest this to get a return on my time that is going to allow me to live the lifestyle that I want? It provides clarity.
100%, man. Honestly, I early on in my journey, I thought I'd get the most satisfaction and happiness from buying fancy things, but honestly, I get the most satisfaction from buying back time. There's nothing like it, putting those systems in place. And one question that I have for you is, when you were scaling up now to bigger multifamily properties, were there some challenges that you faced? Like, were there some growing pains that you came across? What are some that sort of stick out the most for you?
Oh, there's tons of growing pains. To go from a single family to a fiveplex, let's say, there are growing pains in that. But to go from 5 to 15 or 30 or 100, I think there's a lot more growing pains to that, because as a entry level investor, you can sort of manage the workload of 5 new tenants. But to incorporate 50 or 100 new tenants, like, you need dialed in systems, you need a team to support you. And if you don't have that business background, or if you're just like going through the trenches for the first time, you are going through an entirely new world. And so I often think about something they never tell real estate investors from the get-go, is that real estate investing is a forced personal development program. And as you go through, those different levels, you have to become a better version of yourself to then give that back to your tenants, your team, your community, and you kind of constantly grow through that ladder. But I think one of the biggest challenges that comes up is the capital requirement, right?
Oh, yeah.
In Victoria, let's say, if you're buying a single family home today, you're somewhere between 600,000 and $1 million, let's say. If you're buying a multifamily home or property, you're sitting there looking at 8 figures easy. And so to go from the capital requirement of 20% down on an $800,000 property with maybe a little bit of renovations, to having to build up a 40 or 50% loan to value capital raise, that's a huge endeavor. And not only that, is sometimes that comes easily, like in a hot market like we had from, say, 2016 through 2020, 2021, capital is flowing fairly easily. But what comes behind the scenes of that is all of the relationship management as well.
Yeah.
All the accounting, all the administrative work, and all to make sure all the time spent connecting with people, sharing updates, It's not just once capital is in the bank, your hands free. No, you have a lot of responsibility after that's in the bank account as well.
I agree, man. Tell me, do you have it all systematized in like a CRM to manage your relationships? How do you go about that personally?
Yeah, this is something that I could totally geek out over for days. I'm so glad we're here at this conversation. When I was 23, I got exposed to CRMs for the first time, and it was jumping in the deep end. And it was a platform called Salesforce. Have you ever used that?
Yes, I've heard of it. I
Yeah.
haven't used it myself, no.
Okay, so Salesforce is like the pinnacle of CRMs. It is the most robust. It is the most sophisticated. It is an all-in-one tool that you can use. And so for a rookie CRM user going into that, I was really overwhelmed. And I got really frustrated with it really quickly. And if you're not detail-oriented, or if you're more of like a sales guy or a creative, following systems is really challenging. And I don't know if you started off that way and have just built that into like, your personality, but it took me a little bit extra time. But once I got it, man, did I find the value out of it. That was a past career. Today, I use something called Monday.com. It is really user-friendly. It is a great entry point CRM. It does everything you need to and then some. It's really customizable. And I've tried to automate as much of it as I possibly can. So from the capital side of things, if I'm speaking on a podcast or a stage, or if I'm doing any kind of marketing, I typically lead out with a Calendly link. Right? And then within that Calendly link, there's some questions in there that people would answer. Those get automatically dumped into my CRM. And then I get a notification on my phone saying, hey, Janet just, booked a call to talk about such and such projects. And then I can immediately do a video message. Hey, Janet, what's going on? Thanks so much for booking a meeting with me. Really looking forward to seeing you on Tuesday. I see here that one of your goals is X. I can't wait to chat about that because I love traveling as well. Just wanted to put a face to the name. Love you. Have a great day. And then that builds relationship. And then, trust comes with that. And then everything afterwards as well is systematized to help make life easier. And as you start to pile on more, you want things to be easier.
I love that, man. I can geek out on this as well, by the way, because this I'm super passionate about that. And one thing that most CRM users know is the most effective and powerful CRM is the one that you use, because that's the tough part, right?
Spreadsheet or whatever it is. Yeah, as long as you have somewhere to put data and information, do it.
But
and preferably not on paper. But
in the current world that we live in, AI is this big thing, and automation, and I feel like if you're not implementing that in your business, you're kind of falling behind, right? But of course, it doesn't replace you as a person. So I like the systems that you put in place. The video that you send in, where are you sending that over? Is that on Monday?
No, it's a text message. So within one of the required cells in the Calendly link is their phone number. And here's a quick little networking hack. I used to go to trade shows of 45,000 people or more sometimes. And what I learned quickly is that if you don't get their card, you have no way to contact them. So if I give you my card, you can contact me, but there's no way that I can reach out to you for business. So I'm always looking for contact details, and I don't take business cards to conferences. Like, if you want to chat with me, cool. I've got a phone, you've got a phone, I guarantee it. Let's swap numbers now. Yeah. Super helpful, because then you can be the initiator. Otherwise, you're just waiting around, leaving it up, up to fate. And so in that Calendly piece, there's a phone number. And that way I can say, hey, this is the number I'm going to be calling from. It's a great way to, adjust on the fly if needed. So if they need to change the meeting time, they can just, text me, which I try to avoid now that I'm trying to systemize more by integrating an EA. But at the very least, it's still a positive start to what could be a fresh new relationship.
No, I get that. I do the exact same thing. And so I've just a follow-up question, so that we don't go down that rabbit hole, because I could go down that rabbit hole. I don't know if our listeners want us to go down there, but so you were pretty intentional about it all. And I agree, one of the biggest roadblocks I see for most investors that I speak to on them scaling up is the capital side, right?
Yeah.
And that comes with learning how to foster those relationships. Where were you looking when you started to grow? Where were you looking to grow these capital partner relationships? Were you going to just investor meetups? Were you looking outside of the real estate realm and going to just social events? What was your strategy? Because you seem like someone who's very strategy orientated. So what was your go-to move back in the day?
I am very strategy orientated, despite thinking that I have a good poker face. The strategy back then was, not a whole lot different than how you said it about the CRM. The best CRM is the one that you use. And so use the tools that you have in your belt. So if you are an introvert, use that to your advantage and lean on the close relationships that you might have, or partner with somebody who has a network. I'm not an introvert. Maybe at heart I am, because I do enjoy downtime. It recharges me, but I love being around people. I love having conversations. I love helping people. And so I think what worked then still works really well now. And to me, it's actually just about time. And so similar, like when you work with investors, it is, again, a marriage. The deals are going to be years long, and thus your relationship is going to be years long with these investors. And so I don't think that you can ever spend too much time with a potential investor on the front side of things, or ever. Because on the front side of things, you want to make sure that the project is right for them, or that you're right for them. If they say, hey, I'm looking for, or I'm looking to buy a new property in 6 months, but your project is going to be a 5-year term, probably not the right fit unless they have excess capital.
Yeah.
And so back then, I started to meet up, and it was similar to the story around your podcast, actually, where we just needed a space to facilitate education.
Yeah.
And in Victoria at the time, there was nothing really educational based. It was a little salesy from, some realtors out there, or it was like the old boys club. Nothing for me, the average Joe kind of thing. And so we just leveraged the network that we had, which was real estate professionals. And we said, hey, we're going to host a real estate meetup, and we want you to come speak to it. And I want to learn just like the other 12 people in the room.
Yeah.
And then 12 turned into 20, 20 turned into 100, and so on and so forth. And it really just kind of came back to the intention of it. If the intention was for me to stand up on stage and sell, the room's not going to get a whole lot bigger than 12 people. It might even shrink. But if the intention is really about how do we be the instigator to the tide that lifts all ships, the room is going to continue to grow. And the more value you can provide, the larger your network is going to grow. And so that's sort of how the network initially began. And then webinars and conferences and, Facebook groups became more of a thing. And but I still believe that it's a mix of all of it, but lean into what your skill is. I can talk to masses, no problem. And I don't have that like gun shy thing. If you're more comfortable going one-to-one, start with that.
Couldn't agree more, man. Play on those strengths. But I like that strategy. That's super smart, honestly, super smart. And yes, you would not have grown had you not been providing the value, because no one wants to sit through a sales pitch.
Yeah.
Now, if we switch it over to, with scaling comes a lot of risk management as well, right?
Yeah.
And recently there's been a few people that have been over leveraged and gone under, and a lot of people that have lost money, right? And I know this is a fearful topic for a lot of investors. How do you approach the risk management side, especially when taking on larger projects? And now you've gone into the development side, so you keep growing. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so I haven't acquired anything recently. Later 2021, the market on the island just got way too hot, and I couldn't make any numbers work. And I still saw people acquiring at the time, and I actually got pressure from like people close to me, even my business partner, like to go and acquire something. A little bit of that risk management is like, if it doesn't feel good, don't do it, and trust that gut and intuition, and like don't mess with the numbers. Like we could have sat there and gone, cool, maybe if this works and that works, then we hit our margins and then we're good to go. But then one is one too many maybes. The other thing about like risk management is time on the field, right? And you can have all of the theory about football that you want. But as soon as you get on the field and you get tackled, you go, oh, theory didn't tell me how much that was going to hurt.
Yeah.
And so there's a ton of people that are sitting there with over leveraged properties, but not necessarily to any fault of their own. We have a property right now that's probably over leveraged, depending on how you look at it, because we bought it in 2021 before we started to look at how the market really escalated. Out here, anyways, it really escalated, but it has fallen quite a bit, and not necessarily from a value perspective, but from a perceived risk perspective from lenders. So let me give you some context. Then we could get an appraisal for whatever we wanted, basically. You could go in there and, back in the 2020, 2021 days, you could buy a property for $1 million and tomorrow it'd be $1.20 million, right? And so when we were going through a project that we were going to go through rezone and development permit, build permit, construction, sell, at the time we could go and get an LOI, letter of intent for construction financing, without any prerequisite for sales. Then a few months later, it was, no, you have to have, like, the world kind of came down because interest rates grew faster than ever. And all of a sudden, your lenders are sitting there going, oh, now there's a whole bunch more perceived risk. I need to be much more conservative. So instead of being really ambitious around what the market was doing, even if the rest of the fundamentals didn't change, they pulled way back. And so, funnily enough, you and I were chatting before we hit the record button. Everybody has a great plan until you get punched in the face. Muhammad Ali. And so you can have a great plan. Warren Buffett says risk is the cost of opportunity. And I think it's also Warren Buffett, but it might be Ray Dalio, who says risk is what's left over after you think you've considered everything. And so risk management is like, it's time on the field. You want to get around mentors who have been doing it forever, who have been through multiple different cycles, who know the ins and the outs of the business behind the business. You want to build those relationships with the professionals, the lawyers, the accountants, the brokers, the A and B lenders. And you want to have just as many genuinely curious conversations as possible. Take them out for coffees, go for runs with them. I helped this guy on a boat, and I had no business being on a boat. But it got a lot of time. I got a lot of knowledge out of it and trust with that individual. And I think that's one of the biggest things, and it's certainly been one of the biggest payoffs, is all the time and attention that I've intentionally put into building those networks has paid off over the last couple of years.
And you're just coming in hot with all the different quotes.
Yeah. If you look at my TikTok feed, it's like quote after quote after quote after quote.
So your portfolio and all of your investing, is it like hyper local, or are you scattered across Canada?
No, it's pretty local. In 2019, we actually sold about half our portfolio, and right before we did that, we were starting to look at market fundamentals, and it kind of felt like it was getting a little bit too hot, kind of thing. And we were also looking at what history had done, and often it repeats itself. And what I mean by that is, like, every about 10 years, there's some sort of recession. And so in 2019, we were kind of 10 years out, or however you look at it, from the Great Financial Crisis. And so we were like, maybe we take chips off the table, right?
Yeah.
And so we did that. We leveraged up into some development projects, and I totally forgot what your question was.
Oh no, I was just asking if you like hyperlocal, because I know some people are hyperlocal, and then others sort of diverse across Canada in different markets. I wanted to know how you go about strategizing that out.
Thank you for the reminder. Sorry about that. So back then, we looked at like going south of the border, and we actually got down to 3 different states that we really liked from like an economics perspective, which is always the first thing you look at. And then we kind of made the decision that I don't want to go down across the border. There's too many uncontrollables. It'd be too expensive to fly down there all the time. Anytime you leave Victoria, it's like $1,000. So it'd be too expensive going down there to maintain team. It would take too long to build the team. There'd be too much opportunity cost to spend a year building that team. So then we looked at Alberta. We looked at Ontario. We looked all across the different provinces across Canada. And then we kind of made the fundamental decision for the business, which is I want to be a backyard investor. I want to make sure that instead of being wide and shallow, I want it to be deep and narrow. I wanted to be the expert in my area. And so just doubled down on what we knew best.
No, I get that. I get that. And so in Victoria, what would you say, what are some of the biggest opportunities as well as like the biggest challenge in the current real estate market that you're seeing right now?
You want the good news or the bad news first?
Let's tie them in together. Dealer's choice, man. You do it.
So I think the biggest opportunity comes in two places. One, I think it comes to those who can be patient.
Yeah.
And that comes back to like the business behind the business. You really have to be strategic with your acquisitions here and not get caught up in like that FOMO piece of oh, I want to be buying, right? You want to be buying the right product, the right thing for you, the right thing for your business. And you want to make sure that it's not just a good deal, it's a great deal.
Yeah.
The second thing that I think there's a lot of opportunity for is strategic land acquisitions. Some, actually probably all of the best, like the highest performing deals that I've ever been a part of have come from the buy, as a lot of people have previously said before I have. And so going through like OCPs, really be getting familiar with the official community plan of the neighborhood or the area, and sort of cross-referencing that with infrastructure lines, like where new sewer, new water, new hydro might be going. And you can kind of like create a breadcrumb trail, right? You can see where larger developers are buying, and that's a lot of where some of that relationship capital comes in. And then you can just drive down that road, buy something there, and be patient with it. And if you get really, really familiar with the OCP, and if you're a go-getter and can go door knocking, I think there's a ton of opportunity for some infill projects, not only in Victoria and on the island here, but I know a lot of that is highly interesting in the Edmonton area too. The challenges here, one, I don't want to get into politics necessarily, but there are a lot of challenges with BC's, political outlook. The Fed too, just was that yesterday or the day before, new capital gains tax. The Premier BC, I don't think wants people to make money in real estate. They might have their own plans on how to build housing, but from what I understand, the public is needed. So that's a huge challenge, I think. And then the second challenge is change. People on the island here, Victoria was dubbed as like the newlywed and nearly dead. And so with so many deep roots in Victoria, people don't want to see their neighborhood change. And so even when you come to a public hearing and you say, hey, I want to go from a duplex to a fourplex, you get a lot of negative input from the community because they don't want change. They want the shadows. They don't want the extra traffic. Totally understandable. But a lot of municipalities are stuck in that really difficult decision. Do I maintain power and control and do what most of the community wants? Or do I do what's probably best for the area and think 50 or 100 years down the road? And too many politicians in general are just really short-visioned. And I'm a big believer that even terms need to drastically extend or create some sort of incentive for people who are thinking 50 or 100, 200 years down the road.
I know Alex Moses, like he's a big proponent for extending the term, the length and the time frame in which you sort of plan for anything, right? If you're trying to, hey, I'm trying to be a successful real estate investor and retire within the next year versus how can I do this sustainably over the long term, you just come out, you increase your odds of winning essentially. I have a question though, is going from the single family we've touched on, moving to small multifamily and scaling up that way, what was the mindset shift between switching to, hey, I'm buying existing multifamily units, maybe doing the value add approach, to let's go into the development side? What sort of inspired that, and what advice you have for other investors looking to make that switch?
The inspiration, I think, was always there. When I first got into the real estate space, even before even doing it myself or as a career, my uncle drove me to one of his properties. And it was these three really beautiful, stunning, new modern homes, not too far from where I live now. And he goes, check these out. And I was like, wow, I think I was like 14 or 15 at the time, maybe, like, sweeping his properties for little coin on the side kind of thing, saving up for a car. And I was like, these are amazing marks. These are beautiful. And he goes, yeah, this used to be one property. And I subdivided it. I built these. And, this is how I did it. And from that moment, I could see it really vividly. From that moment on, that is what hooked me, I think. And the end goal at that point was always get into development. So as we grew from the singles to the doubles and doubles to quads and quads to larger multis, down the road was always getting into development. I just always had a limiting belief of, I've got to be 50 years old or 100 years old to do this because it's like the old boys club. And so I think there, like the mindset shift came throughout that journey of the work I did on myself and the confidence that I built and the network that I built, the knowledge that I built. And I briefly kind of commented on it before, like real estate investing is like a forced personal development program.
Yeah.
And as I continued to kind of graduate through some of that program, it became more and more realistic. I think that's when, plus a little bit of market evolution to just like having land, densified zone land was going to be like a lucrative move here on the island as well. Like those two things combined, it was pretty clear at the time that was the right decision moving forward.
Yeah, no, I get that. And I mean, even here in Edmonton, I would say it's also market dependent. And now sort of the time where we've seen a lot of these multi-family investors switch over to the development side, right? Because
there's no money in the multifamily side, or it's too competitive.
Yeah.
That's the other thing too. I got to say this because for those of you who don't know, competition is your enemy with anything money related. So, for example, TVs. What was the cost of a TV 15 years ago? Probably double what the cost of a TV is today.
Yeah.
But the technology has gotten so much better. How is it then a third the price? Competition. So, same thing happens in real estate. If there's one person looking for, 100 different assets, the world's your oyster. You then have most of the control. But if there's 100 people looking for 100 things, maybe it's balanced, it's fair. But if there's 1,000 people looking at 100 things, now, man, that gets really difficult because all that competition is going to say, hey, you know what? Instead of 15% margins, I can get 14 and be fine. And I'll make it up here or there, or I have this competitive advantage. And then somebody goes, you're 14? Nah, 13's fine. And then 12's fine. And then you get this like, race to the bottom. That's what competition is in the industry. It's a race to the bottom. So you always have to be on the cutting edge of something or have a competitive edge in the space to be able to make it work.
Yeah. No, I get that, man. I get that. It's some fun times ahead because honestly, right now there's a huge lack of inventory. So it's like it's primed for the development, at least here in Edmonton where I'm at. I can't speak for everywhere in Canada, but
let me ask you, what do you think? Like, this is a little bit on the fly, but what are your thoughts on like solving the housing crisis? What if you had a magic wand and you were going to be like, hey, I'm going to change one thing, what would it be, do you think?
I would say make it a little easier to create more housing because I don't see us solving that issue anytime soon.
Right, so let's remove some red tape.
I see the city sort of moved in that direction, at least in Edmonton, is where, you don't have to change the zoning, right? There's specific criteria, and if the lot meets that criteria, it's a little bit easier. But that being said, that's in theory. There's still a lot that goes behind it, and it's long time frames, longer than you'd think. So it's not as easy to get these units out there as one would hope, right? And I mean, of course, there's a lot that goes into it. But yes, if I could wave my magic wand, I'd say that's probably it. Because I don't see us solving it anytime soon, and I don't see the supply meeting the demand anytime soon. Yeah,
Yeah. I don't disagree.
What would your answer be?
Yeah, I mean, if you had a magic wand, you could say, "Hey, I wish that there was like 10,000 units, boom, available already," right? And then you could, that might do it. But even still, I kind of think that there's this Kevin Costner effect of like, build it and they will come, right? Field of dream. It's a really difficult decision on a lot of parts, but I find it really hard to imagine if, the government got out of the way in a sense and said, hey, developers, do what you do best. Go and build 10,000 units as fast as you can with high integrity, designed for the
That's the thing.
community. And I think we'd be able to be there in what, 10, 15 years? It's that battle again between like, do I want to maintain control and be short visioned, or do I want to do what's right for the community and think 100 years down the road? It's a tough one to figure out.
It is tough, man. It absolutely is tough. Steve, I want to dive into probably one of my favorite segments of the show. I call this time capsule. Okay, so let's imagine you stumble across a time machine that allows you to travel back and forth in time. Now, you can't change anything, of course, but you can give and receive advice from your younger or older self. Now, first, let's go back to when you were 18 years old. What advice would you give your younger self with the knowledge you have now? Now, this can be business, investing, like it really doesn't matter. It could be familial, it could be like a holistic approach. But what advice would you give your 18-year-old self if you were to come across them today?
If you do find that time machine, please let me borrow it and
send it your way.
It's an easy answer for me. If I could be teleported back to when I was 18, I would tell 18-year-old Steve to go and acquire, like do a Burr method on triplexes and fourplexes year after year after year, move in, fix up all 3 or 4 units or whatever it is, like just really small multis, or to do like the value add to it, and then move on to the next one, move on to the next one, move on to the next one while you're young and you don't care where you live or how you live. You can sleep on a couch, you can sleep in a closet, doesn't matter, you can maximize that rent. And then over the course of 5 or 10 years, going from 18 to 24, 25, where then you start to be, you're dating, maybe you're married, you're thinking about kids, you've got a dog, you want to be a little bit more, stable in life and things, but you can spend those 5 to 7 or 10 years just in build mode to be totally set for, basically the rest of your life. And so if you're at that age, and if you have the same kind of ambition, build up that network, go learn as much as you can. And that's exactly what I would go and tell Steve. That, and honestly, just be really self-aware.
Yeah. Oh, I like that last bit as well. The first one, honestly, is, I'd say it's one of those that we get time and time again, but it's probably the best answer because there's nothing for the compounding effect, right? You got started at age 24, just those 6 years, the amount of difference that would have made just going forward, compounding year after year is insane. And so that's the one takeaway is, of course, start earlier. The other one that I got from that response was start acquiring earlier versus just fixing and flipping. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. Like just that passive income, maybe it starts off as $300 a month, and then you stack another property, and that's another $300 a month. So I think within the course of the course of 5 to 7 years, I think you can easily get to a point of, back then when I was 18 anyways, I think you could probably get to a point where it's $5,000 a month, and you can basically live wherever you want pretty comfortably for and possibly for $5,000 a month while it's already being like sort of self-managed or managed by a team.
Couple that with the lovely appreciation you guys see over in BC, and yep, it's absolutely worth it, right?
It can be.
Let's jump ahead to your 80th birthday. What advice do you imagine your future self would offer your present self at your current age?
I do this often, not at 80, but at 60, 65. And I actually find it a really powerful practice when you're facing adversity. Is I try to visualize like my ideal self, like who I believe the best possible 10.0 version of Steve would be, and what that person would be at 65. And when I can really get that clear visualization, I'll like kind of have a bit of a conversation with them and go, hey, what did you do to get through this, and what would you do differently? So I think like at 80, looking back to where I'm at now at 36, I think the biggest thing that he would say is keep going. You got this.
I love that, man. And I like looking at things through that time frame as well, as it just puts everything into perspective for you. We tend to make things that don't really mean much more big of a deal than what it really is. And so it puts it all into perspective, and those things that are really important. But aside from that is, I think in your case, you're pretty good at that. if you're someone who's very strategic and thinking 2, 3, 4 moves ahead, right? What's the ultimate goal? What are we working towards? So yeah, no, I love that, man. Now, for listeners that have been like, damn, the Steve guys dropped some knowledge, some
Great
golden
quotes.
nuggets, man. Yeah, some great quotes. I want to follow this guy's feed so that I just get those quotes every day. Where can people follow you? Where can they find you? Where's the best place to reach out to Steve if you're like, hey, I want to connect with this guy?
Yeah, best place for me is Instagram. So it's Steve Arneson official, all one word, little @ sign beforehand. And one of the goals that I've made for the last 3 years has been to double down on content. And for the last 3 years, I didn't. And it was one of those like self-aware moments of like, ah, man, I keep saying I'm going to do this. What the hell, Steve? And so this year, as of December 22nd, I think it was, I said, hey, you know what? I'm going to make a new piece of content every single day, a new post on Instagram every single day, and 3 new stories to provide value, to share wisdom, and to connect with people. And I'm proud to say that I have not broken that streak. So best thing in the world, get a habit tracker. Mine's called Streaks. It has been 120 days as of today where I have made a post every single day. And so if you check out the page, it'll be like business, real estate, mindset.
Love it, man. And the reason why it really hits home hard for me is a couple of years ago, I gave myself a similar challenge. This was even before the podcast, and I said I'm going to post content every single day for 100 days. That was the goal. And I think I got to like 260, and I'm like, well, I've done it. And
that's awesome.
And this wasn't even real estate related. You know, I was heavily into just fitness mindset and all of that, and I did it every single day. And I think it geared me up for this though. But no, so, I love that, man.
Let me ask you really quick then.
Consistency behind that. Yeah.
The consistency, like, what was the most beneficial thing you got out of that whole 200 plus days?
Firstly, it was getting out of my head, because initially it's like, okay, let's plan. What am I going to do? What am I going to say? Script this whole thing out and it has to be perfect. And then you realize that no one cares. No one cares if it's perfect. You're the only person who does. And so that was the first thing, was just getting out of my head and cringing at all the videos that I shot. But then afterwards, it was honestly just, I think I was just honing in on just, and up until today, I don't think I'm that great of a speaker, but being comfortable behind the camera. I got really comfortable being behind the camera, being able to just like, I didn't get my video out today. I'm getting my video out today, no matter what, and just hitting record and just being comfortable with it. So I'd say that's probably the biggest thing, is being comfortable behind the camera and being comfortable just not being perfect about it all and not having it all scripted. And yeah.
That's awesome, man. I got to share 2 things just to wrap on that, because the no matter what piece, so valuable for your own self-character.
Yeah.
Right? When you say you're going to do something and you actually do it, and you know that it's being hard. And I've been sitting there like 11:50 at night before, and like, damn, I need to make a post, and I'm tired and I'm exhausted, and I look at it and I go, I could just give in once, right? And you have that little devil on your shoulder.
Don't break the chain.
No, you know what? Don't break the chain. And that no matter what piece has been so fundamental for me. And this leads perfectly into the second thing I want to share really quick. So this is going to be super awesome for everybody listening. I call it bowling ball habits. And if you imagine bowling, you get 2 tosses at 10 pins. And so how you want to build and stack your habits is, if you only get 1 throw, 1 action, if you will, how do you get the most results out of that 1 action? And from what I recognize with like sort of content creation, or with posting on Instagram every single day, it has been like what you said. Like, I hit so many other pins that I want to work on: my public speaking, my vision, possibly writing a book down the line, and having like a library of content, and staying on the cutting edge of like AI. And so for me, the content piece specifically, and as I really got intentional with my time and actions, it has helped me so much, other than just make 1 post a day.
Yeah, no, 100%, man. After that 260 days, I was like, well, I feel like I didn't really have much direction with the content that I was posting. So I didn't really explode and become this social media influencer. And again, this was back then, it wasn't even real estate related, but the skill stacking that comes from that is honestly where I've seen the biggest ROI years down the line, and where I thought nothing would come from it. So there was benefits to that 100%. So yeah, man, anyone out there, if you have any challenge that you've given yourself, just stick to it. It's 100% worth it. Steve,
what's the challenge
brother,
that you're facing now?
What's the challenge that I'm facing now? Personally, honestly, it's probably even like staying consistent with the podcast while being super busy with everything else and helping my clients, my investors that I'm working with right now, because I think that takes priority above all the other things. So it's I would say just a bunch of growing pains. Like I'm growing my team internally, managing that aspect. So putting that time in up front so that it can allow me to have better leverage and just better serve the community. I'd say that's probably my biggest challenge. But I find that really fun and exciting. So it's just chipping away at it one day at a time while working on the day-to-day things that need to be done. I'd say that's probably it. Yeah.
If you haven't read Dan Martell's book, Buy Back Your Time, you'll definitely put it high on the list. Yeah, it's phenomenal.
I'll check that out. Well, that's book of the episode. That should probably be something that I include in my episodes, is asking about a book. So that's probably a book to go check out. But Steve, honestly, brother, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you sharing. There's been a ton of value that I've gotten from this, and I'm sure the listeners out there have got a ton of value as well. So I'll leave Steve's info in the description below, so you could just easily click through it and find him that way. But Steve, thank you for coming on.
It's really been a pleasure. If there's anything I could do to help, reach out, and looking forward to chatting more.
Thank you for tuning in to the Wealth Through Real Estate Show. If you're interested in learning how to build your wealth through infill development, then you don't want to miss the episode where I interview Carleen Sue. This is your host, Al Ray Noble, signing off.